Today, I'm joined by someone who doesn't just talk freedom, he lives it. Adam Hudson is an entrepreneur, investor, podcaster, and freedom maximalist who saw the cracks in our financial systems long before most knew where to look. From building a seven-figure Amazon business to educating more than 17,000 students worldwide, Adam has walked the path of resilience, reinvention, and radical clarity. And now, through his platform, Unemployable Media, he's raising the conversation around Bitcoin, crypto, sovereignty, and the future of money. In this conversation, we're going to go deep into what most people won't say out loud. We're going to talk about why the old systems are collapsing, how crypto and Bitcoin is more than currency, it's a consciousness, what it means to take radical responsibility for your wealth, and why now is the time to think beyond borders, beyond banks, beyond fear. This is for the CEOs, creators, and heart-led changemakers who sense the shift and want to be equipped for it. Let's move past the noise, let's move past the fear and into the truth. So let's welcome Adam to the show. Welcome.
Wow, what a beautiful introduction, Maryanne. Thank you so much. I'm stoked to be here.
You're so welcome. Adam, you have walked an extraordinary path from selling on Amazon in LA to podcasting now, you're based in Cyprus, to being one of the most forward-thinking voices on financial sovereignty. I haven't seen anything else like this. And so I really wanted us to go beneath just your resume because there's just so much to what you're doing. But maybe let's start with what first cracked you open? Like what cracked open your awareness that the traditional financial systems just wasn't going to support the future we're moving into?
Yeah, great question. So, I'm an Adelaide boy originally, born in Henley Beach, and I've been an entrepreneur since I was in my late teens. The last time I had a job was when I was kind of 19, I think. I worked in a picture framing shop in a Westfield. And when I discovered what an entrepreneur was, that immediately was like resonated with me. And so from that day on, I sort of basically spent the next 30 years as an entrepreneur. I'm 51 years old today. And I think the beginning of the awakening for me, the big shift in my life was a combination of probably, when I look back on it now, probably two or three things. But the first one was COVID. So, like most Australians, I was asleep and compliant. And really at that time believed that the government could be trusted and that we should comply and do the right thing and roll our sleeve up you know, and I didn't think. I look back on it now and I go, I didn't critically think about what was being asked of me. I just thought, oh, I'll trust the government and I do my thing. And then I look back on it now and I realize, I believe anyway, that the Australian people were scammed big time through that period. And there was massive government overreach. And when I analyze it in hindsight, I realize it's because they attacked the thing that was most important to me in my life, which is freedom. And I turned 50 a year and a half ago, and I woke up in a world that I'd achieved every business goal that I had set. I lived in a beautiful home, a $7 million oceanfront on the sand home, paid for, Porsche in the garage, brand new, income for life, tick all the boxes. And investment properties, all freehold, everything done. But I wasn't happy and I didn't feel alive in my own life. And so it gave me, I turned 50 and I was fine on the day until my neighbors, I live in a little building on the Gold Coast. I lived in the building before I moved. And my neighbors put a big 50, two silver balloons in the lift for me when I got in, because only 7 residents in the building where I owned. And I saw these big 50 and I pulled them out and I put them in the living room and I looked at them and I was like, oh my God, I'm 50. And it really hit me like a ton of bricks, because I'd spent all my life up to then seeing the old people in those daggy restaurants celebrating their 50th birthday. I'm thinking, oh, those poor buggers are getting old. And then all of a sudden it's me. So I really started to think really deeply about what I wanted to do with the time I had left. And I realized, I wanted to change things. But and I'll talk more about that in a minute, but really at the beginning of the awakening was looking back and going, what is it? Why did I start this journey of the pursuit of money, of the pursuit of wealth, of the pursuit of, having a nice home and all the things that we go for? And it was way back when I was 19 or 18. I remember that my definition of success was going to an airport, and I used to do this before I had any money in Brisbane. I'd drive out to the international airport, I'd buy a coffee, and I would sit and look at those departure boards, and I'd see all these exotic locations. At the time, I was working in a picture framing shop making $300 a week. And I'd see Dubai and I'd see Nairobi and Paris and London. And I think one day I'm going to make it so that I can go up to that counter and buy a business class airfare to anywhere in the world and buy whatever I need when I get there. That was my definition of success and why I started. And so 30 years later, when COVID came around and they threatened to take my freedom, well, didn't threaten, they did take my freedom and restrict my movement unless I complied. I look back on it and I just think how disgraceful that was. But at the same time, I'm also grateful for it now because it really woke me up to start thinking and being actively involved in my own life again. So that's a quick, I guess, explanation, and then I can talk about anything else you want to talk about around moving or business or whatever you want to talk about.
Yes, yes. So, where to begin? So many questions. The I'm sure everyone that is listening can relate to that feeling around freedom being taken. In Adelaide, it wasn't so much like that, but we know that in Sydney and in Melbourne in particular, restrictions were tough. I was living in Melbourne. I did 9 months of lockdown. I only am, an hour outside every day, being policed to, an inch of its life there. But it was a good reflection point, even though it was so challenging. I love that you're acknowledging that, yeah, it was terrible, but it gave you a pause to think about what was going to happen next. And I love that with everything that you are creating and have created, you have spent time thinking about what it was early on that was really activating for you, that was creating that sense of freedom, that was the big picture vision, and that you trusted that you trusted yourself to bring that back in, at 50. And I think a lot of people, when they reach that milestone, are too scared. They're too scared to face themselves in that way. And so I really love that about what you just said. And so how did it happen that you went through, you were in that COVID situation post that? How did the move happen? Like, that's a big thing to just uplift your life. It's not just moving to the country, you're
Mm.
moving overseas. You're like, what happened?
Yeah, so I had a very public midlife crisis on camera in front of 70,000 people on Instagram. So, but I did a reverse midlife crisis. Usually you know, go buy the Porsche and get a woman half your age. That's sort of the thing that men do. But I did the opposite. I sold everything. Like, so what happened was I that questioning and that awakening started me down the path of exploring other things that had been in my mind. And I consciously went and said, look, the first big decision was I asked myself, do I want to spend the next 10 years of my life trying to grow my wealth in the same way that it has been the central focus of my life for 30 years? So people look at me today and go, oh, wow, you just become so successful, and I had some businesses. And the truth is I failed at most businesses, and I had two or three that have made me a lot of money. And then I put all the money in real estate, and the real estate went through the roof, especially in COVID. And that's how I got rich. But um, it led me on this bigger question of, like, do I want to spend the next 10 years of my life with money as the central focus? And the answer was no, because there's nothing you could show me, Maryanne. You could show me the best Ferrari or Lamborghini. I've had all of that. You show me a boat, you could show me any physical thing, and zero turned me on anymore. There was nothing I wanted to work for anymore. No thing that I wanted to work for anymore. And so then I went, okay, I don't want to spend the next 10 years of my life focused on money. There's so many other aspects of life that I want to explore, like spirituality, my creative side, travel, connecting with cultures properly, slow traveling, spending time noticing what's really going on in countries and so on. So I made that first conscious choice. And I'd been a Bitcoiner since 2017, right? But I'd always owned it as a investment to make money from. And through COVID, I had time and I never sold it. I never sold any Bitcoin I've ever acquired. I've just kept it, bought more, bought more, which has also today become a significant portion of my wealth. And I started to go down that rabbit hole and I started to understand that Bitcoin was far more than just an investment, right? And I started to understand what personal sovereignty meant. And I noticed around Australia, when I looked around at people around me, I noticed this underlying, especially on the back end of COVID, this growing tension on the roads, this underlying anxiety in the average Australian. And I could see cracks in this idea that we were the lucky country. And I could see it, but I could also feel it. Because what had happened is the rich got richer through COVID and the poor and middle class, the poor got poorer and the middle class just disappeared. If you didn't own assets in that period, if you were a young Australian saving for a deposit, the goalpost in the course of 2 or 3 years just got extended by 100% because they helicoptered money into the system. And of course, when they do that, that money finds its way into assets, right? So people get money, they live, and then if they're intelligent, the rest of it has to find its way into investment. And there's only a few asset classes that are available globally. And real estate in Australia is one of the top. So when people have discretionary cash and interest rates go to zero, they buy real estate. So I was a beneficiary. My commercial properties went up millions and millions of dollars without me doing anything. Just the interest rates dropped. So everybody, all the retirees said, I can't get a return on my term deposit anymore. So I need to buy something else other than cash. Cash is now a terrible investment because the government dropped the interest rates. And so they all went into real estate. So if I had a building that had $100,000 a year rental income, where it was those buildings were selling for 7% yield, so if you get 100,000 and you divide it by 0.07, that will tell you what the building's worth. For your listeners, what happened was one of the property sales, I saw this and said, I'm selling because the prices people were paying for commercial real estate just doubled.
Yep.
And so the last building I sold, people were paying 3.8% yield. So if you get the same 100,000 and you divide it by 0.38, you get a number that's double, right? So because people were saying, well, even if I get 3.5%, it's better than zero that I'm getting in the bank. So there's all this demand for property. So what happened was I looked and started to go, wow, this seems grossly unfair. Even though I'm a beneficiary of it, the average person, if they did not have assets, they got decimated. And I started to discover that this is how the middle class gets hollowed out globally. You're either on the side of owning assets or you're not. And then everything else gets more expensive, or your groceries get more expensive. And this whole, because of inflation, and of course, inflation is caused by money printing. And I didn't understand this fully. And I watched Australians being hypnotized by a current affair in the mainstream media telling them that the evil banks and the evil supermarket chains are to blame. Okay, yeah, that's true. Coles and Woolies are the most profitable or among the most profitable chains in the world. Now, banks are super profitable and among the most profitable in the world. But the bigger problem is that the underlying money supply, the technology that you're storing your life force and energy in is being deflated away. So, like a nurse goes to work for a day and she gets paid. Imagine how it would change the world if in 10 years that money that she saved was worth the same. It could buy the same goods and services in 10 years. It would change the world. But we know that it's not. So she's actually incentivized to spend that money today because the longer she holds it, the less it's worth in the future. And so what this does is it keeps people working harder and harder and harder and harder and never getting ahead because they're incentivized not to do the thing that creates wealth, which is to invest and save and have a long time preference. And so I read a book called The Tao of Bitcoin, and there's one sentence in that book that absolutely stopped me in my tracks. And it said, because of inflation, we've turned our houses into hotels, our cars into taxis, and our bodies into porn. And if you think about that, you think about what the average Australian is now doing. They're watching and listening to this podcast right now instead of tending to their loved ones and spending time with their kids because they're trying to get smarter to make more money because they realize they're going broke
Yeah.
slowly because our government is printing more money, mismanaging the funds, taxing us harder, and the impacts are enormous and important. Like people are not having kids anymore because they can't afford them. The houses that we're buying are smaller and lower quality. We go to Woolworths, the food we get is smaller and has less nutrition in it because of this inflation issue, which is the government prints money. Like I saw a meme yesterday, somebody said to Jerome Powell. Jerome Powell says, I'm going to make some money today. And the person goes, you mean you're going to earn some money today? And then Jerome Powell is just like silent. And you're like, silent. No, I'm literally going to make money while you earn and work for it. And that's the system that we live in. They print and make it up so they can live for free while we give away our life force into a broken technology called fiat currency. And so I started to understand Bitcoin and at a very, very deep and a spiritual level, and it changed my outlook on so many things. And so I sold up all of my real estate in Australia, including my home, and I said, I'm out. And I've paid my taxes on all of those real estate sales, and I've changed my entire life to become a sovereign individual, and I've never been happier.
Wow. Uh, yeah. Again, I knew that going into this podcast, the stream of questions would be unlimited. So I'm gonna try and keep some sort of structure in my brain. But I mean, the system is rigged for us to fail, right? And social media has been a big piece of that puzzle because it's been influencing and encouraging a competitiveness, which was always really there. That whole keeping up with the Joneses, that's always been there. And especially in Australian culture as well, there's this keeping up with the Joneses, but then also you can't be a tall poppy. It's this beautiful, nuanced, craziness that goes on here. But social media has made it so that the perception is you unless you can show the material things, you're failing. So people have chosen, and this was even during COVID, even before COVID, were putting themselves, they were maxing out the amount that they could borrow for these big houses, status cars with loans, all of these things, so that it on the outside it looks a certain way. But what they haven't realized and don't realize is they are trapped. I mean, they probably know that now, but they are trapped. And to to change those circumstances means an ego death. And this is why I love the work that you're doing, because it's not just about the money. It isn't even about that, really. It is about being sovereign in all of its aspects, and money is a big part of that. But for the collective, it is very much an unwillingness, and this is what it feels like, an unwillingness to surrender that side of things. And that's why the world feels stretched. The tethers feel like
It's
completely stretched, and then we've got so many extremes, and we've got these big organizations, these big corporates who are feeding off, and sort of, it feels sick. Like, I feel sick when I think about it. It's like pleasure from the pain that people are being put through, but these people won't surrender and fight. And in Australia, and I'd really love for you to talk to this as well, in Australia there is an unwillingness to stand up for what is wrong. And I feel like we're behind a lot of countries. Like, when you look at Australia now that you've had some time away, do you feel like that is still the case here?
mm. There's a lot there I want to comment on. So I want to just double click on the ego death side of it. I know a lot of people will say, it's easy for this guy to say, not have the fancy things because you've had the fancy things. Yeah. So that is unfortunately part of the journey for many people, right? So, in the last 2 or 3 years in Australia, I had a Ferrari, I had a Porsche, I had the beautiful home, I had all that stuff. And I would be lying if I said it wasn't. It was interesting when I went to sell my home because my home was a real status symbol. Like it was probably one of the most famous buildings on the Gold Coast. There's only 7 full floor apartments in that building. One of Australia's richest guys lived in that building on the top floor and he owned the bottom floor and he built the building, got a multi-billionaire. The other people in the building were worth hundreds of millions of dollars. And everybody knew where I lived, that I lived there with them. And it was a status symbol where I lived, right? And having the car and all this bullshit, right? But I got very honest with myself and I just was not happy in that life. And I met a lot of these people and I could see all the things they were doing and none of it excited me. Um, I would look at an Instagram reel and see somebody walking through a back street in the Gothic quarter of Barcelona or, um, you know, exploring Portugal or, going to Ayia Napa and jumping off the Greco cave cliffs in Cyprus. And my heart longed for something real, experientially. That's what I wanted. And I wanted to double down on my charity work that I do. And so I could feel those things were for me. That was the silent whisper in my mind. It was, Adam, just let it go. Just let this time of your life go. And now I live in a rental property. I got a cheap car and I don't own anything. And I'm trying to own less. I'm trying to sell my car, so I don't even own that. But the flip side is like last weekend, I had an opportunity to catch up with a friend in London. So I said, yeah, I'll come up on the weekends. I just jump on a plane, got a business class return flight for $1,200 and went and watched the heavyweight fight at Wembley Stadium, stayed in the best hotel, and then came home after 3 days of city culture back to my home on the beach in Cyprus. And all of that was paid for by the ATO. I mean, I don't pay the ATO anymore. People say you seem so much lighter. And I said, well, I gave up this 3 day a week volunteer job that was a terrible work culture. And I gave up heaps of money to do it. And it was working for the tax office from Monday to Thursday for no pay. So there is though there is a real thing about that moving past and letting go of ego and really tuning in to what brings you joy and where you find happiness. And I find it in very different places now. I find it in the other day. I've got a friend here at the moment. There's a little coffee shop called Angel's Coffee Shop here in Old Town Limassol, and the lady runs it. Her name's Angela. She's owned it for 4 years. It's in a 1,000-year-old building, and she just knows everybody in that district. She knows what everybody's coffee is, and she's just like this lovely person. And I'd seen her because there's a little video of her online. I went in there with my mate Tommy, who's here at the moment. We sat down, had a meaningful chat with her, and learned about her background, her family, where she's from, and she was interested in us. And there's a real richness to that day because I was not chasing money, hitting the phone, looking at my Instagram. I actually was eyes up and engaging with the world again. And the beautiful thing about travel is that you come alive because in your life in Australia, and when I look back now, I see Australians are addicted to real estate prices, maths, and the football, and maybe the petrol prices and beating up on banks and Woolworths. And we're kept in this little circle of agitation about these issues that are so myopic. And Australians are so rich relative to the rest of the world. Like it's insane how wealthy they are. I was talking to a young lady here who waited on me at a restaurant, beautiful young girl. I said, tell me your story. Like everyone's got a story. And she's here as a refugee from Nigeria, and her family's literally been murdered, right? And she hasn't in 3 years left the city of Limassol. Like she doesn't have a car. She literally hasn't left the city. I've seen all over this island because I bought a car when I got here. I've been to both coasts, up and down over to the Turkish side. She's been here for 3 years and she hasn't seen outside of this city because it's where she came 3 years ago and she works her backside off, and that's life for so many people globally. But Aussies have become so myopic. And And also the brainwashing is just so strong in Australians, like and this overly, especially from a lot of the men, this overly aggressive, I need to be right. I don't want information. I want confirmation that I'm right, and anything that flies in the face of their strongly held beliefs backed by absolutely shithouse results, they feel threatened and attack, and they just don't want to listen or learn. I'm like, all right, enjoy that. Have a nice life. And I moved away because I just simply couldn't relate to that mindset anymore from middle Australia. And I was just like, I'm done. I need to go and explore and make new friends. And since I elevated my consciousness, the opportunities and the ways that my life has changed just in the months that I've left is extraordinary. And the moment I stepped into my truth and just started to say what I really thought and how I'm really feeling and sharing what I'm really doing, as they say, if you really want to know what a man believes about finances, look at where his money is. Don't listen to what he says. Look at what he's done. I've exited. I am out. And I look at Australia and I like people. So I've been called a deserter. I've been called a courageless, gutless, all the shit that people throw at you. And you're like, mate, you don't know my life.
Yep.
I was talking to an MP who booked a one-on-one call, a sitting member of parliament last week, who said, Adam, we booked this call because we want to know how to leave. And we serve in the system, and we've learned that it's a complete fucking scam and you cannot change it. I'm like, I know. Australia has this culture where they have absolutely no respect for power or leadership, which is fine and it's a good thing. But that's why also, like, why would a good person go into politics? They can't change it. It's completely corrupt. The uni party is not going to, you know, the uni party is in control,
Yeah.
Labor, Liberal. No, no, you look at some of these highly intelligent people like Gerard Rennick, for example,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
others like him. There are
Yeah.
those people that didn't even get a run. They don't even get a look in unless they
Yeah.
bend the knee to the uni party and the unions
Yeah.
that run the country. And these entities are ruining the country. They've put us into epic debt. And the people who, like 20 years ago, were in surplus, we're now nearly $1 trillion in debt. Look at the state of Victoria. They've accumulated since 2012 more debt in those years between 2012 and today than the entire formation of the parliament in 100 years.
Yeah.
They've accumulated in 10, right? And you're seeing it, and you know who's paying for it. They're socializing this debt to the average person. On the Gold Coast, they've brought in view tax. So if you've got an apartment over level 4, they've now increased your rates by 50% because you've now got a view tax.
Yeah.
I mean, what did the government ever do to create that view? What's it costing them to maintain the view? And they're coming up with new taxes, new ways to just put Australians under more and more and more and more pressure.
Yeah.
And you know the truth, which I hate to say this, Maryanne, Australians need more pain.
Yeah.
And the reason I know that is because they're not fucking marching on the streets, right? I'm going to be in London on the 13th of September, meeting Jordan Peterson and Russell Brand in the biggest street march in Europe's history. There will be 500,000 people protesting on the streets. Australia,
Yep.
We'll watch a current affair. We'll go on social media and write a few comments. We'll get all wound up, and we'll follow Punter's politics and share his content. And that's a demonstration for an Australian.
Yeah.
But sooner or later, Australians are going to crack. And when they do, there'll be change. But until then, they're just going to keep rinsing and squeezing the life out of the average Australian. And it's very, very sad because I love Australia as a country and I love a lot of things about Australian people. But this she'll be right, mate attitude is going to get us into the same place that London's in and Europe's in and the UK's in. We need to defend our values and we need to defend our borders. And if we don't, we're going to get bred out. The culture's going to be lost to fairly bad ideology, and the country that we all grew up in is going to be lost.
Yeah.
And it's scary. It's scary.
It is. And I mean, it's heartbreaking to hear that we've got MPs who are wanting to exit out because we need the good ones to stay for change. But you're right. I mean, it's a no-brainer for anyone who's got any kind of awareness. It's a no-brainer that we know what goes on. We know that if there's no knee bending for the two-party situations, that there is no movement forward. But how
And
long?
the unions.
Yeah, yeah, oh
Don't let the
yeah,
unions out of this. Like all
yeah,
these overruns that are public funded, that's just going into the pockets of thugs.
yeah, yeah,
And nobody says anything. They're like pro-union. I'm like, fuck the unions. These
yeah,
people are sending Australians fucking broke. They're stealing from our children with our future money. And
yeah,
the only reason they can do it is because they're printing this shit. They're printing it and printing it while they're getting rich. Your kids are going into debt. That's their life force. That's their future wealth is being lent out to
yeah,
these thugs and corrupt politicians.
yeah. Um, when you like, if you were to guesstimate that transformation for Australia, like when you think about how long you think that change is going to take, what's your estimation? Is it 10, 20, 30, 50 years from now?
I don't know. It depends on. We had a very high profile Australian on our podcast recently. The podcast is not out yet. And we asked him that question. We said, what will it take for Australians to take to the streets? And he said, rolling blackouts. The minute that there's rolling blackouts, because we've gone so woke, I don't know if you saw the video last week that went viral of that Australian guy at the energy conference, and one of the media people interviewed him from an international outlet, and he just let him have it. He said, what all you lefty nut jobs don't understand is the world runs on coal. You know, if you want to do all these emissions and all this other shit, you're going to be sitting in the dark with a bunch of candles because you're an idiot. And like all this woke crap that is leaking into our political system,
Yeah,
like that. You're in Adelaide, right? So that young South Australian politician, the youngest sitting member in Australian Parliament history, did her opening speech and did this long drawn out call to country and thanked the 250 nations in Australia, 21 years old. What the hell is a 21-year-old doing who's just fresh out of the university mind virus running our country?
yeah,
It's just she's a young person, so I don't want to be too hard on her, and she hasn't had any money yet. Probably she hasn't any life experience. But don't you shouldn't be allowed into politics until you've lived a little bit of life, right?
yes, yeah,
And so I think that the real problem is like this woke ideology is ruining the country. You know, I was just before I jumped on here, I saw a news article on Channel 7 that down at Bondi, they've taken the weights off the gym that's on Bondi Beach. The reason from Waverley Council was there's too much testosterone. Actually, we need more testosterone in our men, right? On one hand, you've got women saying, where are all the real men at? And then all the men are getting their weights taken away because there's too much testosterone. Don't get our young men to be empowered and be men
yeah,
and be willing to fight. Keep them drinking out of plastic water bottles and dumb and compliant and weak.
yeah,
And it's like, no, weights on the beach has always been a thing in Australian life. Let the men go down there, budgie smugglers, and do their push-ups, and let the girls walk past and catcall them. That's Australia. If you don't like it, fuck off back to North Korea, right? Like, you know what I mean?
yeah,
Seriously.
yeah. I
If they have
do.
their way, they'll be fucking walking around and there'll be no men left. There'll be no, all the things that made Australia great are disappearing. And we're just going, oh, we don't want to offend anybody. Another case this week, just a quick one. In Melbourne, his name's Dr. Koch, K-O-K, right? But
Yeah,
name aside, this poor bastard is a Christian, and he got his medical license revoked this week in Victoria for gross misconduct, not relating to anything to do with being a doctor, but because he put up 46 memes on social media. Among them were disgraceful ideas like there are only two genders, that gender affirming medicine should not be given to children.
yeah,
He's been disbarred. He's lost his medical license in Australia for these thoughts. This is a Christian founded country. We're a Commonwealth country. And this is a problem that free speech is being taken away. People's careers are being taken away. You know, as Ricky Gervais said in his stand-up comedy, he said, God is making man, and he's describing him sitting, he's there sitting making, one of God's mates says, what are you doing, buddy? And God says, oh, I'm making this, it's man, it's called man. This is what I'm doing. It's going to be amazing. It's going to get through ice ages. It's going to get through wars. It's going to be strong and resilient. But then around 2020, there's these things called words that are really going to fuck him up. Like, like it's going to destroy him because somebody hurt his feelings. Like, anyway, I could go on, but I just look at Australia and I see this incredible, beautiful country that is just losing itself to woke ideology, and worse, on the other side, really destructive ideologies that are being imported and not controlled. And uh, yeah, anybody who speaks up against the power ends up being a victim.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we saw that in its full truth during COVID. There were a lot of extremes, and I think it really brought all of that to the surface. And um, yeah, it is really, it's very disheartening to hear that Australians are going to need to feel more pain in order for that change to happen. And I've felt that pretty much from the get-go. Like, I don't think we're anywhere close to where for that breakthrough either.
It's
But it's just sad. It's just so sad because it doesn't have to be like that.
and and the arrogance is there as well. Like I get the memes of people contact me and go, "Oh, you're in Cyprus. Oh, okay. Isn't that where the banks took 40% of people's money in 2012?" And they sort of like laugh. And I'm like, "Don't you live in a country where they take 40% of your money every year?" And they're like, "Oh, yeah." And I'm like, "Yeah, maybe think about that before you criticize a country that takes 12% of your money and doesn't charge any capital gains tax," right? Like
Yeah.
Australians have this lack of empathy for challenges that are outside the world instead of deep gratitude for many of the good things that they have as well. But yeah, I mean, people have just got to start really, I think, waking up. And that Bitcoin thing was, when I started to really understand what money is, and started to view it as a technology to store our life force, that can't be deflated, that can't be manipulated, that can't be confiscated if you know what you're doing and you learn proper self-sovereignty. Um, that is a technology that is absolutely life-changing for people to completely be able to, opt out of that corrupt system if they want to. And so I spend now the time that I educate now. I don't do business coaching or any of those things now because I'm just not interested. And I tell people, don't start a business today. It's too hard. Um, and especially in Australia, because it's just everything is lined up against you. 80% of businesses are going to fail anyway. That's always been the stat. So you're entering a game with an 80% chance of failure. And then you've got a government that's openly hostile to you when you start that business. So why would you do that? There are better options out there now, but you've got to be completely open, and you've got to start to learn, and you've got to start to consider that everything that you think you know is maybe completely wrong. And when I put an ad in the paper, I said to my real estate agent, it was a very high-end property that I sold. I said, tell the Bulletin, which is the newspaper, that I will take Bitcoin for my property, all Bitcoin. You can pay me $7 million in Bitcoin if you want, and I'll give you this home that many would consider the Australian dream. And as expected, the media jumped straight on it, and it went all over the country. This crazy nut job will take fake internet money. And I did it because I knew how most Australians would think I'm an absolute idiot for doing it. But what I understand that they don't is that I know the history, and I know that, for example, that house that I bought, I paid $4.7 million for it. If I'd put that same money in Bitcoin at that time, I'd have $30 million of Bitcoin.
Yep.
And I wouldn't have had to pay any rates. I wouldn't have had to pay any. Instead, I put it into the house. I had other Bitcoin anyway, but it just shows you the mindset of people. And people say to me, aren't you worried about the volatility or that, Bitcoin's risky? I said, if you want to know how risky money is, go to ChatGPT and type in, let's say that you believe inflation's 4%, which I don't believe it is. I think it's double digits in reality. When you count house prices,
Yeah.
food, insurance bills, power, what's going up at 4%? You tell me,
Yeah.
nothing, right? But let's go to ChatGPT and say, if I have a thousand Australian dollars and inflation is 4% a year, what is that $1,000? What's it worth in 30 years? And the answer is $360, I think it is, or $400.
Yep.
And they extend that out to 100 years. The answer is nothing. It's down 100%. It's almost down 100%. It's like 2% of its buying power.
Yep.
So I'm like, you want to talk risky? You know, Australian fiat currency is absolutely going to zero.
Yep.
But people they don't get the magic trick because they just go, oh, just things are going up. I'm like, no, they're not.
Yeah.
Things are going up in dollars. They're going down in Bitcoin.
Yep.
And you just, instead of the government saying, oh, sorry, your money, the money that we print is just becoming worth less and less because we're printing it. That's not explained. What it says is coals and woolies are evil and the prices are going up. Yeah, that's true, but so are their input costs. The
Yep.
cost of their electricity, the cost of their rent, the cost of their employees, all those wages are going up because of inflation. And of course, it means more at the checkout. And yes, they price gouge and do all those other things, but you've got to start to think a little bit deeper than what a current affair and your government tells you to be pissed off about.
Yep.
Because usually there's something else that they don't want you to see. Because if you did understand it, as Henry Ford said, if people understood money, there'd be a revolution on the streets in the morning.
For sure they would. For sure there would.
Yeah.
And it is like all of that makes so much sense. So let's start talking about let's start at the very beginning because we're going to have people at lots of different levels on this podcast. But okay, so when there's obviously a difference between crypto and Bitcoin. There's two. So why Bitcoin over crypto?
Great question. And I love that you're asking these basic questions because the average person is too shy to ask those, thinking,
Yeah,
oh my God, like I don't want to sound silly, right? So you're not silly. I just love anybody who asks the simplest questions because that's what we need to learn. We need to learn not to be embarrassed to ask what you think might be the silly question. So here it is in very simple terms. Bitcoin is what we call decentralized. It means that there was, and it's what we call a proof of work network. So, and it's the only proof of network. So what does that mean? So it means that when it started, in order for people to get a Bitcoin, it wasn't ever given like, we're going to start off with 100,000 Bitcoin and just give it to our friends and then hope it grows from there or give it to ourselves. In order to get a Bitcoin, you had to solve a problem, a computer problem, right? A math problem. And if you invested in a Bitcoin mining machine and you set the programming in motion and invested in real world energy costs, which comes from sunlight and real energy in the world, and your computer solved that problem, you got a block reward or a Bitcoin, right? So you get a Bitcoin for doing work, for expending real resources to mine a Bitcoin. Every other, and there was no issuer, there was no central human being. There's this entity called Satoshi. Nobody knows who they are. If it was a group of people, if it was an individual, but that person created the white paper, set this piece of code loose on the world and said, let's see if this becomes something. And it became something, right? It became something that very, very smart people started to understand. It's a bit like gold. So when you think of gold, you can't make gold. To get gold, you have to go and expend resources. You have to get a digger and a shovel and do some geological work, and you have to actually expend effort to get it. That's why it's valuable. If it was just sitting on the earth, it wouldn't have any value. You just go and pick it up and that's it, right?
yeah,
And interestingly, the price of gold is quite often quite tightly tied to the cost of getting the gold with the energy resources and all the other stuff. So it's a proof of work network. Everything else has a team of human beings and a foundation or a company at the top that has issued these tokens themselves to themselves and the insiders. And then people buy them and they issue them in the same way that money is issued by a centralized government. And so, and some of these tokens, some of these things do solve real world problems, right? So, for example, USDT is issued by a company called Tether, and it's probably the most profitable company on a per head basis in the world. They have 100 employees and they did $13 billion profit last year with 100 employees. Try and get your head around that, right? So what they do is if you live in even Australia, but if you live in like Turkey where there's huge inflation or Argentina, you get paid in Argentine pesos, you can go into a crypto exchange, you can put your money into the crypto exchange, you convert it to USDT, which is a digital token. But what Tether do, the company, is when you buy a USDT token, they then go and buy a US Treasury bill. So it's actually backed by a promissory note from the US government. So it's essentially it's a US dollar that's digital,
Yeah.
right? So it's a digital US dollar. And why would people do that? Because they know that the Turkish lira and the Argentine peso, until Javier Milei came in, inflation was through the roof. So if you held your money in Argentine pesos, by the end of the week, the price of bread was double. But if you held it in US dollars, people would still take $1 at the end of the week for the same loaf of bread, but they wanted twice the amount of Argentine pesos. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So they created a digital mechanism for people to store their economic value without it being inflated away. And it's ironic that it's pegged to the US dollar, which is probably the worst of the offenders of like printing money. But the point is that USDT, Tether, is a centralized business with a CEO and so on. And so Ethereum is the same. XRP is the same. They are, in my mind, essentially tech startups that are trying to solve real world problems. XRP is trying to be a competitor to Swift. So to move huge tranches of money between as a global payments network for banks. Okay, and it's going to be far more efficient and all this, and that's great, and it may save the problem. But when you start getting into the world of CEOs and companies and boards, you now have the counterparty risk of what if somebody's fraudulent inside of that company? What if Russia wants to move large sums of money on the XRP network and it's a centralized American business? The American government can bring pressure to bear on that XRP entity, which is in the United States, to influence. But with Bitcoin, there is no entity, there is no CEO, there is nobody that could be manipulated or pressured to change the issuance of the tokens,
Yeah.
right? There's no inside deals to be done because there is nobody at the wheel. It is completely trustless. And so as a sovereign Bitcoiner here in my home, I have a Bitcoin node running down the hallway here. And on that Bitcoin node is every transaction that has ever been transacted on the Bitcoin blockchain since day one. And when I interact with the Bitcoin network, I do it through my own private node. So my transactions are private. I access it through a air-gapped cold card wallet. So I'm completely sovereign. If I don't like the rules in Cyprus and how they treat crypto owners, I just buy a plane ticket. And even if I lost my cold card device and if I'd be fine because I know how to store and create sovereign ownership of my time and wealth through Bitcoin. I can just go to any jurisdiction that is friendly to Bitcoiners, and there will always be countries that want wealthy Bitcoiners because they're intelligent and they've got money, right? And so now you're seeing countries competing for wealthy, intelligent people. Australia, unfortunately, is not one of them. Australia is actually anti-intelligent, wealthy people. And so Bitcoin is a decentralized. There is no head, there is no office, there's no marketing department, there's no place. Putin came out and said, you can't stop Bitcoin. There's nothing anybody can do. Bitcoin is here and you will never shut it down. China tried. They said Bitcoin mining is now illegal. Shut down 40% of the processing power of the Bitcoin network was in China when they announced that. And you know what happened? Absolutely nothing. All the miners just relocated to places that said, we're Bitcoin friendly. Bring all that mining equipment here. We're happy to work with you. And, I interviewed Prince Philip of Serbia. And I said to a massive Bitcoiner, I said, Prince Philip, why are you a Bitcoiner? And he said, well, what really turned it for me is when China tried to ban it and it didn't even miss a beat, not a beat. And he said, if you'd taken out 40% of the international banking system in one announcement, the entire global financial system would crash to a burning halt. Bitcoin didn't even flinch. Nothing changed. He said, you will never stop Bitcoin. And Yeah. So Bitcoin is decentralized and everything else. And yes, can you make money? Will XRP holders get rich? I don't know. I'm not anti-XRP. I hope everybody gets rich. All I'm saying is I don't invest in tech startups because I
Yeah.
don't know Brad Garlinghouse. I don't know his management team. I don't know all the details. I went to Paris Blockchain Week just recently and I sat and listened to the heads of some of the biggest banks in the world saying, look, what you guys in the audience don't understand is that, your blockchain's running on 10 decimal points. Our banking systems run on 4. Right? You can't even talk to our banking systems at the moment. Yet you're here pumping the price of your tokens. This is at a crypto summit,
Yeah.
right? And the heads of Santander Bank are there saying, until you guys actually learn how to integrate, all this stuff about integrating with the global banking system is not going to happen. And I only learned that by going to Paris and sitting in a boring fucking session with bankers to actually see that there's all these real world risks. But the average Australian's just looking at their phone at the pub going, what do you reckon, mate? XRP, you reckon it's going to $10? Do you reckon it's going to $1,000? They've got no clue how to value this. They're just like betting on horses.
Yes.
And like just one quick example, to give you an example, my mate Tommy is here, was a big XRP fan. He goes, people reckon it's going to $10,000. And I said, let's explore this just for a quick moment, right? What is it now? $3. Okay. So if you add up all the XRP tokens and multiply it by $3, it gives it a market cap of $150 billion. That's what the project is worth. I'm like, okay, is that a lot or is that a little? I don't know. So we did a little bit of research. Well, what's MasterCard and Visa worth? Right. They're two huge payments companies, and they're combined at about $1 trillion. So if XRP became the same value as Visa and MasterCard, the biggest retail payment distribution networks in the world, it's at 150 billion. So they have to go up 6 times to become worth a trillion, or 7 times to be worth a trillion. So that means the price goes from $3 to $21, right?
Yeah.
And online at the moment in YouTube, everyone's going XRP to 10,000. And I'm like, bro, if it gets to $21, it is worth Visa and Mastercard combined.
Yeah.
And they go, okay, well, what about the global payments network, SWIFT, right? What's SWIFT worth? They move more money than Visa and Mastercard. And so we went into ChatGPT. Okay, how much money goes through Visa? How much money goes through Mastercard? How much money goes through SWIFT? And it
Yeah.
was amazing because through SWIFT, it's $5 trillion a day, which dwarfed Visa Mastercard. So we did some numbers, and then we sort of saw our way that maybe XRP, if you apply the same metrics, the long story short was it might get to, I think we got to a number of $20 or $25 was as far as we could sort of get. And people are talking about $10,000. Just absolutely no logical research on how to, you know what I mean, like value these things. So they're projects. They're companies that are trying to solve real world problems with all sorts of counterparty risks, from people to technical integration issues that I tried to touch on with what I was saying with Paris Blockchain Week.
Yeah.
Unless you know all those things, you're investing in a tech startup that you don't understand. Whereas with Bitcoin, you're investing in an idea. And I'd be happy if you've got a minute for me to explain very simply why I think Bitcoin's a winner. And people, when I tell them, they're always like, oh, that makes perfect sense. So if you want, I could explain that.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Okay. So here it is in a nutshell. And the simplest way I say to people why I believe in Bitcoin. So the way the world works, as I said right at the start, is we all go to work, people and companies, and then we pay our expenses, and then we've got some surplus. And with that surplus, we invest it, hopefully, right? Some people don't invest it, they invest it in drugs and everything else, but smart people invest it. And so, okay, if you've got $1 million to invest, you look out at the world and go, what are my options? Okay, and as it turns out, there's about 7 or 8 options that the world invests in. Okay, so and you can put it all on just one piece of paper. There's real estate, there's bonds, there's fine art and collectibles, there's gold, right? So there's these categories, right? Real estate and cash are all on this chart, right?
Yep.
Now, Bitcoin is on that chart. But if you saw it all on a pie chart, Bitcoin's a tiny slither because it's a $2 trillion asset today. At today's price, all the Bitcoins that are on issue multiplied by the price today adds up to about $2 trillion. Is that a lot? Is that a little? Right? Like I said with XRP, trying to get a valuation. Is it a lot or is it a little? Okay, well, let's have a look at what it's competing with, because essentially in Australia, people don't buy houses to live in. They buy houses because they're an investment, right?
Yeah.
Correct. That's why house prices are out of control, because it's no longer a commodity, a utility.
Yeah.
It's now an investment,
Yeah.
right? That's the problem. It's an investable asset. So if you add up all those assets, real estate, cash, fine art and collectibles and everything, Bitcoin's the smallest at 2 trillion, but the total pie is over what we call a quadrillion, which is $1,000 trillion roughly, a little bit more now. So all the assets together are 1,000 trillion, and Bitcoin represents 2 trillion, the
Yeah.
smallest piece. Another way to say it, if it was all on a $100 note, Bitcoin would be about 20 or 30 cents out of the $100 note. The rest of that money is parked in bonds, real estate, cash, and everything else. All right. So when you're looking at it through analytical eyes as an investor, and when I say investor, the global investors, if you're managing a Harvard endowment fund, if you're managing the retirement fund of all the police officers in America, or you're just a person looking to invest, you want to invest in the best possible place. Okay, so what's the best performing asset out of all of those assets? Let's start there. Well, since 2009, when Bitcoin was launched, the number one performing asset in the world every year for 17 years has been Bitcoin, and not by a small margin, except for 3 years. 3 years, it wasn't number one, it was like number two or number three. But everything else, it was number one by a mile. Nothing even came close to the returns of Bitcoin. It is the number one performing asset in the world,
Mm.
right? What are the counterparty risks? There is none. There's no government. There's no human being. There's the counterparty risk is they try to ban it, but they can't,
Yeah.
right? Maybe quantum computing, and that's another discussion, but that's actually not a threat either. And if quantum computing cracks Bitcoin, it'll crack everything, the entire banking financial system. And why would you go and crack the thing that's got $2 trillion of assets when the banks and cash has way, way, way more, right? If you
Yeah.
could have the technology. So you've got the best performing asset in the world, in the history of the world, representing the smallest piece of the global pie. Now, do I think that Bitcoin's going to eat the whole lot? Probably not. But do I think that the wrong number of allocation to the best performing asset for 14 of the last 17 years is zero? Yes. Yes, in my opinion, having none of it is the only wrong number.
Yeah.
So if you've got a family office or you're trying to grow your wealth, you might go, you know what, fuck, how much longer can I ignore this asset that's just ripping the face off everything else? Let me just get 1% or 2% or 5% allocation to this.
Yeah.
And unless you're completely asleep, the entire planet is waking up to this. Banks are now recommending it. Governments are now recommending, except Australia. Australian banks are doing everything they can to stop Australians from getting exposure to this asset.
Yeah.
But it'll change. They will bend the knee, and it'll be a matter of time before Commonwealth and NAB custody Bitcoin and charge fees for holding it for you. Mark my words, it's coming. Um, so you got this unbelievable asset that is outboxing everybody, and a lot of people are still like, "Isn't it risky?" And I'm like, "Dude, it's not a tulip. It's not a hyped up thing that's 6 months in. This is 17 years old now. How much
Yeah.
longer are you going to ignore this?" And as the world begins to wake up, there's more millionaires on Earth than there is Bitcoin. So even if they just want to own one Bitcoin, they won't not going to be able to.
Yeah. Yeah. It is, it hurts my head thinking about it. I'm one of those people, right? I know, I know about it. I know the importance of it, and I feel like that's why, before I was saying there are people at lots of different levels, but um, it feels easier understanding it like that. And before the podcast, over the last week, I've been interviewing people like local Australians, people in my community about what kind of questions to ask you, just because I really
Mm.
want to break down any fear programs, any limitations. And one question in particular was to start investing in Bitcoin. Like, what's the baseline? Like, how much do you need to invest? Is it $100? Is it $100,000? Like, where is the starting point? And what are the risks? Like, so say for like I've got one couple in mind who are retired and they've got these savings and it's their life savings and it's sitting in the bank. They're not investing in property, but it is sitting in the bank and they're concerned that their money is going to disintegrate into the abyss. And so they were wondering like what are the short-term gains and what are the long-term gains? So if you can talk some more to that, that would be amazing.
Yeah, so very, very important around financial advice here. People have to get their own financial advice. So I can't give specific financial advice because I don't know these people and I
Yeah.
don't know anything about their risk profile and all the other stuff.
Yeah.
But to answer a few of those questions, so um, I think it helps tremendously for people to realize a couple of things. First of all most hardworking people who are in the system um, that are still just fodder for the machine. They get up, they go to work, they have just enough to get by and maybe save a little bit. They live on what we call a short time preference, meaning they need money now and they don't have money generally rewards those with a low time preference. People who make a decision and are patient. That's why real estate investors get rich over time, except through COVID, they got rich really quick. But generally speaking, it's that low time preference that gets rewarded financially.
Mhm.
And Bitcoin, that the first thing people should do is not buy Bitcoin. They should buy a book called The Bitcoin Standard, which is by Saifedean Ammous. And he's an intellectual, and the book is incredible. Get it on Audible. It's much easier to digest by audio. And it will explain, it sounds like it's about Bitcoin, but about 70% of it's actually about money. And the last 30% is about Bitcoin and why it's incredible. But just for simple terms, if you get people to go, okay, what did a house cost, just for Australians who are so understand real estate, what did a house cost in Australia in 2012? Okay, and you can easily get the data. Go to whatever it is. It's probably 700,000 or 600,000 or something. Okay, how many Bitcoin did it take to buy the house? And then look at the price of Bitcoin, you'll see it's thousands. And then go, okay, what about 2018? Let's have a look at the price of the house and the price and how many Bitcoin it would take. Oh shit, there's now only 100 Bitcoin. Okay, what about today? Now it's only 4 Bitcoin,
Yep.
right? 5 Bitcoin to buy the average house. So when people see that very simple analogy, they go, oh, okay, wow. So if I bought, $100,000, a house, it would have cost, it's getting cheaper over time in
Mhm.
Bitcoin. But the reason people don't buy it is because they see the charts every day like this, rather than zooming out because they got a low time preference. They're looking at a 1 day or a 1 week window.
Yep.
Bitcoin's volatile, but it's volatile to the upside for 17 years straight. It's volatile like this. But without the underlying education and conviction, what most people do is they wait till it's absolute. They go, oh, I'm not buying this Bitcoin stuff until, and then it goes to 100,000. Like, oh, I'm going to start buying. Then they pile in, and then right at the very peak of the fervor, they buy, and then there's a drawdown, and then they sell, and then they hate Bitcoin for the rest of their life
Yep.
because they didn't have the conviction. They didn't understand what they bought. So don't buy Bitcoin until you bought yourself a little bit of education. Just buy the Bitcoin Standard. To answer the question, every Bitcoin is subdivisible into what we call Satoshis. And Satoshis are like what cents are to a dollar. There's Satoshis to a Bitcoin. And a Satoshi is like worth a fraction of a cent. So
Yep.
you can buy $1 of Bitcoin. And, I could flick you some Satoshis right now instantly. If you had a Bitcoin wallet address and you held up a QR code on your phone, I could take it with my Bitcoin wallet and it'd be instantly transferred to you with now no intermediary. You could buy it on an exchange. So the way you'd buy Bitcoin is in Australia is you would open an account with an exchange like a CoinSpot, or if you're buying over $1,000, I'd recommend a company called Stormrake out of Melbourne. And the reason I'd recommend Stormrake is because they're a broker, not an exchange. And what they will do is they'll look at the global market. Like when you go to CoinSpot, they'll charge you a 1% fee and you think you're getting a good deal, but there's a big spread. So you might look on CoinStats app and see the price of Bitcoin's 100,000, then you buy it on CoinSpot and you paid 101,000 because they've marked it up, right? That's called a
Yep.
spread, like when you exchange money. Stormrate doesn't add a spread. They charge 2%, but net, they guarantee that you'll end up with more Bitcoin for your money than anyone else, and they've been great. So you open an account, you put the money in the account, your fiat money into the account, and then you tell them how much Bitcoin you want to buy, and they will buy it and they'll keep it in a Bitcoin wallet for you, and they'll either hold it for you, which is you're trusting them with your Bitcoin. In other words, you don't actually possess it.
Yep.
What you should do is go to a company called the Bitcoin Way, which is who I use, and they will teach you how to properly take custody of your own Bitcoin. And there's a little bit of training and some hardware that you'll need to buy. But once you've got that, you can't have it confiscated from you. You can go anywhere in the world. It's yours. It's you self-custodying your own financial power. Because the problem is, we're conditioned, like you go and put your money in National Australia Bank and you think you've got money. You don't have money. You have a receipt from the bank saying, we owe you this money. And thankfully, when you put your ATM card in, they honor it, right?
Yeah.
But banks go broke,
Yeah.
right? Banks have problems. Whereas with Bitcoin, the Bitcoin network won't go broke. You can't break it, right? And it's yours. You're taking custody. So you make the investment in learning to self-custody. But you can buy a fraction of a Bitcoin. You can start with $100. You can buy more. But you got to have that low time preference and just hold, understanding what it is that you've bought. And that comes from education. As for the retired couple, they're at a different time in life. I don't know how long they have to go, and what their plans and goals are. But what I can tell you is because it's all about buying power, right? At that time. So okay, if we hold our money and inflation's 4%, take a view. You do your own research. What do you think inflation is? Government tells us it's 2 to 3. I don't believe that for a second. You can just project that forward. How long are they going to live? Prices are going to go up 2, 3%. I reckon they're going to go up 5, 6, 10% a year on most things. How long does that money last? Versus if they put it into Bitcoin, and you can see with Bitcoin, the compound annual growth rate of Bitcoin, you can work it out what it's been, and you can take a view. And it's been for the last 5 years 40% a year. And when I do my calcs, I go, okay, well, let's just say it's 20% a year. What does that look like? And but it's up and down, but overall, that's sort of what it's been.
Yes, that's so much. I mean, there's just what you've shared is such a good place for people to start. And there are lots of good practical things. And the education piece, I think, is especially important, and being and going into that. So you were taught how to hold your own sovereign self, money, all the abundance, all
Yeah.
of that. I think that that's really essential. And I think that's also another barrier that I want, like that was like one of the things that I wanted to cover is, okay, we've talked about like the emotional side of things, about the ego death, letting that go. But now is, this is also about, okay, like how do you start? How, you talked about you could start with $100, that's fine as well, where to go and the tools to use. And I feel like this conversation is really breaking down a lot of barriers and a lot of questions that people have. And like you said, that they don't want to ask these questions because everyone wants to think that they know everything about everything. But I'm not afraid to
Yeah.
ask those questions. And you know, I, I feel like finances is such a mixed bag because you've got your own generational trademark that came through your family and your lineage. So you've got like that to sort of disconnect from and be brave to try something new and not following, I've got Greek heritage, so my dad's all about the properties, and it's like, yeah, but the way that you've built your life, what he has achieved and what he's got is not, that life doesn't exist now. Like I can't replicate what he did because the world is a completely different place. And
They
yeah,
can't afford, like young people can't buy houses now. Like those days are
yeah,
over.
yeah,
Like they're,
yeah,
they're not going to buy a house.
yeah,
And yeah, that's changed. And I mean, I let people, Australians say to me all the time, like, aren't you worried about the banks in Cyprus? I'm like, bro, I don't have cash. Like,
yeah,
why would I hold cash? It's the worst investment in the world. I don't give a fuck about a bank. Like, I
yeah,
don't want to be banked. My goal now is to not have a bank at all. One of my best friends here, he runs an 8-figure business that issues only Bitcoin invoices. And
yeah,
he's over $10 million a year business, only Bitcoin invoices. And you cannot be a supplier to his business if you don't take Bitcoin. So
yeah,
he only pays in Bitcoin and he only invoices in Bitcoin. And he's based in Panama. So he pays zero tax. He has a global business. He travels perpetually. He has not set foot in a bank for 5 or 6 years.
yeah,
And he's wealthy, right? Like, and this is sort of the world, like in Bitcoin. When people say, oh, Bitcoin's not worth anything, I say, really? Well, why is it that I just went to a lending platform? I've got a bit of a Bitcoin stack. So I just did it for fun. I was like, okay, I'm going to put a Bitcoin up as security. So this is a company called Ledn, Ledn. And I just went, okay, I transfer one of my Bitcoin to them and they give me 50% of the value of Bitcoin into my Australian bank account or my Cyprus bank account, whatever, within 24 hours. And I've got 12 months to pay it back. They give me a margin call if Bitcoin price moves too much, but it have to be a big move. They're willing to give me 50% of the value of the Bitcoin, which is going up at 40% a year overnight. And I still get to keep my Bitcoin and I get cash in my bank to live off. And next year, the Bitcoin on average has gone up 40%. So let's say I put $100,000 of Bitcoin in. Next year, it's worth 140. I owe the 50, or I can just roll the debt over, but I owe the whole borrowing cost about 12%.
Yep.
So, you know, I owe 50, what is it? 12% $6,000
Yep.
interest in 12 months from now, but I've got it pegged against an asset that's 100 going to 140. So where
Yep.
might I get that $6,000 of interest to pay them to roll over again? Think about
Yeah.
that. Like
Yeah.
that's a
Yeah.
massive hack that
Yeah.
unlocks when banks understand, and they're starting to now. I have a friend who bought a house in Lake Como, right? And he paid 12 million euro for it. And I said to him, how did you finance the house? He said, I bought it, we borrowed money through Switzerland. Okay, what's the interest rate? 1.5%. I'm like, what in the world? And so I got in touch with the broker and I said, look, I want to borrow money to buy a house in Europe,
Yep.
but I only want to use Bitcoin as collateral. No financials, no nothing. You have to take Bitcoin only as collateral. Within a week, I had two offers for multi-million dollar mortgages borrowed solely against Bitcoin at rates between 2 and 4%.
Yep.
If Bitcoin's worthless, why are they taking it as collateral? Because it is pristine collateral, meaning if I default on my payment,
Yep.
they've got custody of my Bitcoin. So I transfer my Bitcoin to them and they
Yep.
hold it. This is a Swiss bank.
Yep.
If I default, they don't have to wait till Monday till the market's open. They don't have to put the property on the market and wait for months and get offers and go through all the bullshit. They just sell the Bitcoin like that.
Yep.
24/7 they get their money.
Yep.
It is the best collateral in the world for lenders. And as the world starts to understand this, Bitcoin's going to become an incredible base layer asset. It's why Grant Cardone started buying Bitcoin and putting it on his balance sheet because he's understanding now, oh shit, this stuff's going up at 40% a year and I can borrow against it.
Yeah.
It's incredible. So there's a whole world that's emerging here that is just unlocking enormous opportunity for people.
Yeah, and it was one of the questions that I had because I wanted to better understand how do you live day to day? Like say, you've sold everything, you've moved everything into Bitcoin. Like how do you buy groceries? How do you pay
Yeah,
for
I,
flights?
I I just use credit. Yeah, yeah. I
Yeah.
don't hold much cash at
Yep.
all. Right. I feel
Yep.
very, very nervous if I have cash in the bank. I hate
Yep.
having cash in the bank. So
Yep.
I will allocate my cash into investments, and that's how I've always lived. Like people would be
Yep.
shocked. Like I very, very common where I'll have 20 grand in the
Yep.
bank. That's it.
Yep.
And I'm like, but I have cash flow from my investments,
Yep.
but I'll never keep large sums of cash because I know it's getting devalued every day. So I have a credit card and I will, well, until recently when I cashed up, now I don't even do that. But now I just live off a Wise card. I just transfer money onto my Wise card, which is just a global payments card. It's
Yep.
like a non-bank bank, a digital bank. But before that, a lot of Bitcoiners or hardcore Bitcoiners, they will just spend on a credit card where they get 60 days interest free or whatever. At the end of the month, they'll just clear the payment off and they'll keep nothing in their bank in cash and they will
Yep.
just keep going that way.
Yep.
Um, and that's a when you are like people are like, are you worried about being seized or, what was the exit tax? I'm like, there is no exit tax when you leave Australia. They have this
Yep.
idea that there's some application process that you have to be interviewed and cleared by the ATO. No, you don't. Thousands of Australians leave Australia every year. You've just got to pay whatever taxes are due. I sold all my real estate. I have to pay all that capital gains tax. That's the exit tax.
Yep.
And they're so afraid. I'm like, no, I'm a sovereign person. The Australian government allows you to live where you want, as long as you don't lie and you pay what you owe. That's
Yes.
it,
Yeah.
right? Like, and I paid what I owed, and I'm gone. But once you're out, there's a whole world waiting out there for you. But yeah, there's just I don't hold cash, and I And I don't want to hold cash. I want to have my assets invested in things that are not like, the reason I don't like real estate anymore is because as a commercial real estate owner, I had tenants and tenants are late on paying rent, or they go broke, or the roof leaks, or the government starts taxing you everything. Payroll tax, sorry, land tax, rates. They're all just words for tax, right?
Yep.
And everything's just going up and up and up and up. And in commercial real estate, they go, oh, you get a 7% return because that's what the lease says. The tenants are paying, 7% against the value of the building. You're like, no, that's not the real return, because you got tenants that go broke and it takes months to turn them over. You got this, you got this, and you got this. And then I just go, and I can't move it.
Yep.
Like if I decide like I don't like the way Australia's going, they can just keep taxing that property into the ground, and there's
Yep.
not anything I can do. I either got to sell it and move or
Yep.
pay them.
Yep.
And I just went, I'm going to sell it and move. And now the returns I'm getting now are insane. Like, and just by opening my mind and seeing what really smart people are doing, like when I was in Paris, I connected with a CEO of a private equity firm in Paris, and they do some incredible stuff around the Bitcoin treasury space. In the last 8 weeks, my investment in that firm in that fund is up 280% in 8 weeks.
Yep.
Like, these things exist, but because
Yep.
people are sitting at home in Australia watching the news,
Yep.
instead of getting out and actually listening to really, really smart people and going deep and really listening and thinking and being open-minded. I've got other investment. I've got another investment. I'm doing 12% a month net tax-free,
Yep.
like a month, not a year,
Yep.
a month. And and I did the math with an Australian the other day. I said, if I was in Australia and paying 37% on the gains at the end of the year versus you, in 5 years, you're 76% worse off than me off the same investment just because you're paying 37% tax on the way.
Yeah.
Literally 76% less money because you stayed in that system.
I mean, that's mind blowing. And it's just, yeah, I think this is going to really ignite a shift in the people that are listening. If they're already, I mean, it'll either be really great confirmation or it will create some movement, which makes me very happy. Adam, how can people best connect with you? Like, have you got programs where you're teaching and um, you're leading people and guiding people through this kind of thing?
Yeah, I don't sell anything anymore. So we just have the podcast, Unemployable, and my Instagram, which is Adam Hudson Official.
Yep.
And once a year, we just did our first one, which is our Freedom Summit. And I charged $500 to attend, but it was a donation to the John Fawcett Foundation. So I didn't get any of the money. It all went straight to the John Fawcett Foundation. We raised 350 grand 2 weeks ago.
Yep.
It's 650 or something people attend that. And it was 3 nights of me and my network from around the world. There was 9 speakers from 9 different countries, and only 2 of them didn't live in a tax effective location like Dubai, Panama, Cyprus. Everybody lived
Yep.
elsewhere. So it was a really fun event. People loved it. And we just spent 3 nights talking about this stuff. And if anyone wants it, they can just send me a DM on Instagram, send me a screenshot of a $500 donation to the John Fawcett Foundation, and I'll send them the recordings.
Yep.
And it was 3 nights of just this stuff. And I went through those things that I spoke about, those investments. I actually revealed them, and I brought in my investment partners. It's actually an Australian team out of Dubai that run that for me. I
Yep.
control all the money. But they get paid on invoice based on success. So there's all that was done there. So that's the
Yep.
only education that I do for money, but I don't even take the money.
Yep. I love that so much. To say I'm grateful for you sharing your time and your wisdom about all of this is an absolute understatement. I love that you're from Adelaide. I love that you're an Aussie in full rebellion and change making to like the highest level I've seen it. You're an absolute, amazing human, and it has been an absolute pleasure talking to you. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me on, Maryanne. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.